Alright guys, what's going on? Welcome to the next episode of our driver career mode here in F123. We're here in Mexico. And just a little recap of the last race. Texas was pretty good. We had some trouble through the S's there as we were trying to work our way up through the positions from the sprint race and the main event. I don't believe we have any more sprint races. I could be wrong. We'll have to wait and see until we get to Vegas for the second to last race. But coming into Mexico, we're feeling pretty good. We're waiting for a part to come in for our ICE. Because it's in the yellow, it's 69%. And we did get some engine wear components coming in, I believe, last race. But we have some rain coming in for the final race. I'm looking here at the weather forecast and it's saying intermediate rain, so we'll have to wait and see if we have to make any slight adjustments to our setup. Sacrifice a little bit of top speed from that main straight for that. But we'll have to wait and see up until we get into qualifying and those practice sessions to see what the weather is supposed to be looking like. So let's get right into it. Alright, P12 to round out the end of our qualifying here in Mexico. As coming through Sector 2, towards the end of Sector 2, we were about a half second off, and those last few turns there in Sector 3 through the grandstands really didn't help us. We dropped down to about 2/10, 3/10, as you guys saw a second ago. But we're going to be starting in P12, just outside of Q3, side by side with Nico Hulkenberg and Lance Stroll, Sergio Perez, and Kevin Magnussen for the rest of us here in qualifying too, as George Russell, Lando Norris, Lewis Hamilton. As we see Max Verstappen back in P6 for Q2, so we'll have to see how close he can get to the top row. See if Red Bull is actually kind of losing grips on their championship so far this time around, as they are fighting with Mercedes for the lead of the championship. As I believe the last time we checked, George Russell was also fighting Max Verstappen for the Grand Championship. So let's go ahead and get right to the race.
Back in the 60s, Mexico City would host the season-ending race, a party of motor racing. Well, we might not host the finale now, but Mexico hosts a party nonetheless. So welcome to the Autodromo Hermanos Rodriguez for the Mexico City Grand Prix. 17 corners then at the Autodromo Hermanos Rodriguez, 10 to the right and 7 to the left. And all of them will have to be tackled in difficult wet conditions here today. No DRS assistance either, at least not for the start of the race. But the best overtaking opportunities will still be down into turn 1 or shortly afterwards into turn 4. So with the race not far away from starting, here's what today's grid rundown looks like. An immense lap from Carlos Sainz yesterday puts him in pole position, edging out Max Verstappen, who'll start from P2. Looking down the rest of the grid, we have Russell, Hamilton, Norris, Fernando Alonso, Gasly, Oscar Piastri, Ocon, Hulkenberg, Leclerc, Johnson, Stroll, Perez, Magnussen, Bottas, Joe, Tsunoda, De Vries, and Logan Sargent. And with lights out just moments away, it's time to go down to the track. And alongside me once again for coverage of today's race is none other than the great Anthony Davidson. Let's talk about Johnson. What do you make of their performance so far this season?
Well, the atmosphere within that team seems very positive at the moment. Everyone seems like they're in great spirits and having a lot of fun doing what they do, and that's definitely contributed to the performances we've seen.
All right, you heard him yourself. We're doing pretty good so far this season, and we were not expecting this rain. Yeah, this car setup is going to have some issues. Can't really adjust the front wing arrow without. This race is gonna suck for us. Yeah, we're just gonna make the best of what we can on our dry setup here in Mexico on wet tires. So let's get to the race. All right, so here we are in the rain, trying to get our tires warmed up.
Clear patch on its way. There's about 10 more minutes of this rain.
10 minutes of rain, so 10 to 12 laps or so of rain on these intermediates, and we could switch over to slick tires. And it was a little bit of a slow start to try to get those tires warm. We didn't stop completely like we usually do. As once again, starting a P12 next to Leclerc this time, after some penalties. Our teammate getting a penalty for a engine part, most likely, as we almost come in contact with Lando Norris, off to a horrible start. Dropping back down to P15, 16 now, 17, as we're on the outside of the Ferrari of Leclerc. Lando Norris all the way back to P17. We're trying to take our time on the outside, trying not to get in contact with anyone, as now through these first few corners we see a lot of grid changes, as we're just trying to stay as close as we can onto the track next to Leclerc, side by side with him there for a moment, as we're coming up behind the Haas of Hulkenberg, who now sector 2. And we're going to see a lot of coming off track in a lot of these areas on this track. As the S's, as I had mentioned previously, were not very friendly for us. And you can see here as we're coming up to the S, we make that position up into P9, and you can see we go wide into the runoff and making sure we don't come in contact with Leclerc or Hulkenberg as we come out on the track. A little bit of wheel spin there on these intermediates, as like I said, we don't have the right setup on. We have a dry weather setup, which in turn will help us out later in the dry weather. But we have to get through now, and yet again we go wide through here in sector 3, late on the brakes, and yeah, so our brake differential is way off. You heard some wheel spin there coming through the last few corners of lap 1. And we made 3 positions up to P9 from P12. And moving on to lap 7, when we're finally able to get some action. And you can see Hulkenberg close behind. We don't have DRS, but we do have ERS and the toe. The toe is very strong on this track, especially with the long straight of the start-finish. As we're side by side with Hulkenberg through the chicane here, and we end up closing them off as we come through sector 2 now. Still holding on to that P9, as you can see 12.3 seconds back behind us and Esteban Ocon in the Alpine for P8. So the top 8 are 12 seconds ahead, and a couple other seconds ahead between themselves. You see a little bit more wheel spin there as we're coming through this double right-hander. Hulkenberg and Leclerc still close behind, as we try not to go wide this time to the S's, as we did a few times through the last few laps, but we're basically leading the rest of the pack throughout this race here on lap 7 out of 25. 12 seconds trying to close the gap. Now 11.9 seconds, you can see the Haas getting close behind, not close enough to make a move, but we do end up going wide, and we almost come off of the track, come back onto the track, losing our front end plate. There was a scrape, but there was no major contact from the Haas, as we were trying to rejoin the track. And now Leclerc is looking to try to make a move on us here at the end of lap 7, start of lap 8. As Hulkenberg is now up into P9 and making some good ground compared to what we were able to do. You can see Leclerc moving on the right side now in the mirror, closing that gap on us as he's taking the inside. We try not to fight it. We close him off on the curve a little bit, and he ends up going back and falling back on us. So we have defended that position for now up in P10. And now we're actually moving on to, I believe, lap 10 or like 11, I believe it was. We're on board. We're overhead with Granyu Zhou in the Alfa Romeo behind our teammate Logan Sargent. So we're coming through, I believe it was the same lap, lap 10. He comes out of the corner and just a little bit, I don't know if it was a little bit too much power down or he was stalling. Well, you could hear those revs as we're going to make the bold move and come in on the pit stop. So it's the end of lap 10. You see Zhou there on DNF as he slammed into the wall. We're coming in early for our pits to the slick tire mediums. Try to run the rest of this race on those mediums. And what a mistake it was. I checked the weather after coming out of the pits, and it said that there was no weather to come. There was no rain to come. That the weather was the track was gonna stay wet. It was gonna dry out anytime. See overcast here as we're now on to lap 13 when the safety car lifted from Zhou Granyu's spin. Lap 14 now, we're back to racing. I'm all the way in the back, 13 seconds back behind De Vries, and I am the only one on slick tires. So, big mistake. I thought it would be a smart idea with the weather, with how it usually goes, but I was making that mistake. Lap 15 now, we actually have a DNF from Venturi Paddock. You can see as we're coming up on the left side there, the right side now. He had an engine failure coming up towards the end of the season, pulling a virtual safety car. And I believe this may have been the same lap or the following one. We finally come back in and decide to change back over those intermediates, try to get some improved lap times, because we're in the back of the pack and there's no safety car. We're taking the loss at this point. And I don't know how I felt, really. I felt out of it. Like, we're out of the race. There's no point. I'm just going to keep racing and see what I can do about catching up. Because that's about as best as I can do this far into the race on these new intermediates. And following that pit, I believe it was the same lap, the next lap. So we're basically in front of the pack. We're on board with, I believe, Lewis Hamilton. It may have been George Russell, but there is a spin there. In Sector 1 is the Aston Martin and the Haas and the Alpine, they all pass. And, yes, George Russell in the McLaren as the AlphaTauri and the Williams of Sargent stop in front of him. Here's going to be the onboard. The line's still going through the car. We really need to fix our overhead view when it comes to other cars for the replay. That way you guys don't have to deal with that. We'll make sure to look at that between seasons and try to adjust it. But you can see all these cars are having to go by, and you can see the light there on the right side moving over to a red flag.
Play this right, we can get a nice advantage here. Let's have a think about how we handle the rest of this race.
Oh my god, the red flag saved us. At the time of me saying this stuff, I don't know what happened. I'll look at the race director after we go back into the race, but I don't know what I was doing on those mediums. I thought the rain was going to go away. It was saying the rain was going to come back, and apparently the track is not going to be done until after the rain goes away for a second time. So we have lap 19 to 25 on mediums. We're back in this race to try to get up into points. A very, very stupid move on our part. Not trusting the weather there, as we're here in Mexico trying to fight to get back into the pack. So let's get back to the race. And back to the race we go as our 5 red lights are on. We're waiting for him to shut off, and we're off to a good start. This time we're after taking the outside of our teammate, Logan Sargent. And the Aston Martin ahead of us, that is Lance Stroll taking his sweet time. As we have to move to the inside. He almost comes in contact with us as we're basically trying to get up beside him, try to make as many positions as we can. So we're coming up against Piastri and then Lando Norris. Oh, that was Lando Norris in the back. That's Piastri now. As we make a late lunge into turn 1. Luckily, we didn't get any damage to that turn. As I believe, yes, that is the AlphaTauri of Sonoda and Norris behind us. Piastri ahead in P11. Is lap 19, so 6 laps to go as we restart here. And the weather dry enough for mediums, but the track is still a little slick, but still manageable on these medium tires. As we're side by side there for a moment with George Russell. Piastri still ahead as we're coming into the S's, and first time since the start of the race that we were really able to feel how these how the S's feel on these medium tires. And even though we were easing off of the gas pedal, we were able to see how well these tires perform in those S's, and we're able to take the braking point properly here through Sector 3. As we're going to try to look and see if we can make a position on Oscar Piastri here on the next lap. But that is George Russell close behind. So we're coming around the last 2 corners, almost going over the edge of track limits there. As we get a little bit of wheel spin, you can see George Russell's his time frame close behind. You can see him in the mirror on the right side. Same situation as earlier. See him making a move on the inside. As we're going down this long straight, we're going to be staying with him, dumping our ERS, holding that curb. And we gave him the room, but he decided to back off anyways, like previously, earlier in the race. So we get a little bit more snap of oversteer. And we still have about a lap or so before we catch up to Piastri, and that's actually going to be in the same area. So Sector 2, make a bold move, brake late, get up to Piastri. I believe that was our second warning for track limits there. As we're coming up to the S's, and we utilize the fact that Piastri is moving over to the right, and he brakes, and we're going to brake late, take position 11 from Piastri. As we're now 5 laps to go here on lap 21. I'm almost done with it, so almost 4 laps to go. As we have Esteban Ocon, Charles Leclerc, and Kevin Magnussen are the 3 drivers ahead of us. They're almost going 3 wide ahead of us. As we hit our braking point again here in Sector 3. Piastri trying to make a move on the inside, not quite enough room for him to make a move. Almost coming in contact with Esteban Ocon. As we round out these last few corners, we're going to try to get a good launch out of here. That way we can hold off Oscar Piastri off of the straight. But that's not going to be enough. These McLarens have a lot more upgrades than the Williams does. So you can see him in the mirror once again making a move on the inside. That's going to be a ideal thing throughout the entire race, because we can't really fight it. And that little bit of contact there, that little nudge from our front wing is going to be able to push him up, and that's going to be able to pretty much lose our fight between Piastri, and then our fight turns towards Russell as we're now a second and a half behind Piastri. Russell trying to make a move on the inside once again here on lap 23. The same situation, we just kind of let it happen with that long straight and wait for a move later on in the race. As we have DRS on George Russell, but it's not going to be quite enough until the last lap. We get DRS on George Russell, and you can see the rain is trying to come back, but it's not going to be enough to affect us. So we're coming down to turn 1 on the last lap. George Russell P12, about 0.15 seconds behind him. We make a bold move over the curb on the inside. No damage, luckily, to the bottom of our car. As we're managing to hold him off through Sector 2, finish this race in P12.
So as they climb out of the car, the Red Bull team are ready and waiting to celebrate a thoroughly deserved win. Well, Anthony Davidson, a resounding victory today, but what set them apart from the rest?
I feel like consistency was probably the key today. There's being quick, and then there's being quick lap after lap after lap. If you can do that, You can capitalise on other people's errors without making many of your own, and that's an approach that can push you a long way up the field.
Red Bull put up an outstanding fight for the front position today, and it's great to see it paid off for them. They do so much for the sport that you can't help but be delighted by today's race win. Let's see how the driver's standings have changed. Max Verstappen should be pleased with his performance, making gains at the top of the table. So, Anthony Davidson, who would you rank as your driver of the day?
Max Verstappen seemed to just effortlessly weave through the other drivers today without a care in the world. He was definitely my driver of choice.
It's time to see how things are shaping up in the Constructors' Championship. The leader...
Alright, so as we round out the end of the episode, I didn't really want to listen to the rest of that because I was upset. So, very honest mistake on our part, thinking the rain was going to go out after about 10-12 laps. And yeah, so that red flag kind of saved us as we tried to fight for the points, but we still ended up in the same position that we started in a sense. So if we go back to our season standings, as our next race is Brazil or Sao Paulo. Yes, Sao Paulo, Brazil. So we go to our standings. Yes, P12. We started in P12. We finished P12, and we're not moving anywhere on the leaderboard for this season, as we're rounding out the end of the last 3 races here in the season. So once again, here's the result. 2 podiums, 1 fastest lap, and the majority of this is points on the board for us. 79 points so far this season. We'll see if the last 3 races can get us to break 100 points and be the 9th person on the board with over 100 points for this season. So we'll have to wait and see in the next episode for Sao Paulo. We'll see you guys later.